Hi there. Welcome to a brand new episode of Branding with Friends, the show where branding meets key small business topics. Here you're going to learn tips straight from the experts on everything from authentic marketing to book writing to social media. We focus on what you can do right now to use these topics plus the power of branding to attract your ideal clients. I'm your host, branding expert Annie Franceschi of Creative Story Creative. I help small business owners tell their story and show their value through branding. I'm also a former Disney storyteller, a professional speaker, and author of the best-selling book, Permission to Try. And today I'm going to introduce you to one of my new friends in the business world. If you are curious about how to blog for your business, how to get help blogging for your business, and come up with a dynamic content strategy that's going to keep those ideal clients coming in, you're going to love today's episode. My guest today is the very wonderful Lacy Boggs. Lacy is a content strategist, the author of the best-selling Kindle ebook, Making a Killing with Content, and the director of the Content Direction Agency. She helps small business owners create organic demand through content marketing and filling their program and practice without giving Facebook a dime. I love that. Lacy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I am really glad that Lacy's here today. She's going to be sharing 3 great tips with you about content marketing. And as always, we're going to share that third tip right at the end of the episode to make sure you listen all the way through or watch all the way through to make sure you learn as much as you possibly can from Lacy. She's sharing a bit of time with us today, and you want to get every nugget you can from her. Lacy, I'm so glad you're here. The Content Direction Agency, we know a little bit about you now, but tell us a little bit more about how you got into content writing and strategy.
Yes, it's been a long and winding road, that's for sure. I started out I was in journalism. That was my last real job, quote unquote, before going out on my own. And I was working for a hyper-local magazine here in Colorado. And I got pregnant with our daughter, and I couldn't quite imagine doing 60-hour weeks and like being at the office at 3 a.m. on deadline with an infant. So I left that job, and I was a food writer. So I, of course, started a food blog. That's what you did in 2011. And I did that for about a year. And while the blog itself was very successful, I was able to grow an audience, and I was able to, I built my email list to like 1,000 people in under 6 months. And I got invited to guest blog for Martha Stewart's website. I was making like no money. I lovingly call it my 4-figure year because I think I made like $5,000 that whole year. So my husband took me aside at the end of the year, and he was like, I love that you're staying home with our daughter. I love that you're doing this thing online, and I need you to make some more money. And I said, it's cool. I have a new idea. Maybe somebody will pay me to do this blogging thing for them. And it turned out they would. So that was 8 years ago now. And I've been doing this ever since, and it's grown organically. So at first it was just me writing blog posts, and then I educated myself on marketing because my clients started asking me, like, what do you think of this? Should I do that? And I was like, I don't know. So, and then as I was educating myself, I discovered that I had a lot of strong opinions about it. So I sort of went more in the direction of content strategist and started hiring my team to help do a lot of the writing. That's where we are today.
I love it. I love it. And I think it's funny because as many people as I've been interviewing on Branding with Friends, it ends up that around the 2011, 2012 timeframe is where a lot of us were kind of leaving our real jobs, figuring out a side hustle.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different. I actually started a partial food blog called Annie. So it was meant to sell these little things I made for my wedding, but I ended up blogging a lot about cooking. And my poor husband, every time I'd bake something, I'd be like, wait, we have to take pictures before we can eat. Right. So, and I had built a following too with it. And it was one of those things where, just blogging and building an audience doesn't necessarily mean an income. And so I'm so glad you're here to talk about that today. And I think that leads us really nicely into the first tip that you have for our audience. So what is the first thing that small business owners should consider about content strategy and content marketing?
Right. So first and foremost, always, is you have to know your goals for content marketing before you ever dive into the tactics or the strategy. And what I mean by that is a lot of times people, they start a business and they hear you should have a blog, you should have a podcast, you should have videos. And so they're like, cool, let me do that. And they jump into it with both feet, but they don't actually understand, or they haven't given enough thought to how the blog or the podcast or the videos or whatever it is leading to their goals in their business. So 9 times out of 10, when you're a business owner, your major goal is sales, right? Revenue, new clients, whatever that is. But a lot of times there's a disconnect between the content we're putting out and the ultimate goal for the business. So my big first tip is always know your goal first. Start with why and work backwards from there.
I think that's excellent advice. And this is, I'm always proven right, I think, with Branding with Friends, that whatever the topic may be, social media, SEO, content marketing, it's also the same goal that you have with branding, right? So you don't, people say, oh, you need a logo, you just go out and get a logo. But if you haven't thought about the strategy of what are your goals? Like, yes, sales, but not sales from everyone. Right. I mean, some people would tell you sales from everyone and be like, well, that's a good way to not be known for anything, as if it's appealing to everybody. But who's that most, I always like to say, like, your primary ideal client, the person that's most profitable and most passionate to work with. So the people you really love to help, but the people who can still pay your bills, right? Like, they're wonderful people we love to help that maybe can't keep our lights on, right? From as a business perspective. So, you know, what is that goal? Who are we trying to reach? And then we figure out the tactics of how we express that through a brand identity, or in your world, you know, what those blog posts should be, what that podcast should be, what is the content that's going to drive that strategy for years to come and connect you to the people you really can help. Because we can all help a lot of different people, but it's the people we can help the most.
Right.
And people want to skip that step because it's not the sexy step.
Right.
You know,
100%.
And even though it's got an S in the front of it, strategy is not a sexy step. But
and a lot of times people, they'll come up with what they think people want for content, especially. So I've got a glare in my glasses, so I'm just gonna do this. It's driving me crazy. What they think people want, or what they think they can give through content, may be different. So a really great example of this is that like how-to content is generally pretty easy for a lot of us to write, right? We're an expert in our field.
Yes.
And so it feels natural to write a post like how to write a blog post, or how to choose a logo, or how to do SEO, whatever it might be, right? But if your service is done for you, the people who want to pay somebody to write their blog posts or do their logo or do their SEO don't care how to do it. So there's a real disconnect between the kind of content you might be producing and the kind of audience you want to attract.
So if you're listening, Lacy actually just pointed out one of the big mistakes I made early on in my newsletter and the blogging that I was doing. I have over 100 blog posts at greateststorycreative.com. You are the beneficiary of this information if you are a designer, because I did a lot of that, like how to sort of do it yourself. And it took me a few years. And I got a great newsletter. I still remember it, from Nevica Vasquez. And she works with digital business owners. And one of the things she said is exactly what Lacy just said. So it's super true, this idea of, you know, thinking about who your clients are. So my ideal clients are people who don't want to do all this stuff themselves, and they don't even have the skill set, nor should they, right? They're great coaches and consultants who are really great at what they do. And they need somebody else to take on the creative piece. They don't want to do it themselves. So even though it was something I knew to write about, again, a great example of a content mismatch. So I think Lacy's your girl to help you untangle that. I'm your girl to help you untangle it from a branding perspective, but especially from a content perspective, goals matter so much. So take nothing else away from all Branding with Friends episodes. Goals, goals, goals. The second word is strategy, right? Which I think also leads us next to our next tip, which kind of lends itself at, once you've set your goals, what is the next thing folks should focus on?
Yeah, so I really always try to help people understand that you need to make sure that each piece of content you're creating is putting a little signpost, a little rock in the river to lead people to a sale. So my metaphor that I use all the time is, imagine that your ideal client is on one side of the river and a sale with you is on the other side of the river. How are they going to get there, right? So each piece of content you create is like a rock in the river to get them across. If you just scatter them in at random, what are the chances they're actually going to make it across? They might fall in and wash away.
Right.
But if you don't have them close enough together, if you don't have them the right size and shape, right? So when we have a content strategy in place, we are making sure that each rock we're dropping in that river is appropriately sized, appropriately placed, so that it makes it really easy to get those people from one side of the river to the other. And you do that with content through, am I blogging? Or when I say blogging, that's my world, but it's any kind of content, podcast, whatever. But Am I doing it consistently enough? Am I choosing the right topics that are going to make people want to buy my thing? Am I helping overcome objections through the topics I'm choosing? Am I reaching out to new audiences to keep my funnel full? So all those things are part of content strategy, but we want to make sure that every piece of content we put out is part of that little path to lead people to a sale.
I love the rocks in the river. I never heard it quite put that way. And if I ever repeat it again, I'm going to give you 110% credit. But I think that that is the thing, right? Like if you scatter them, you can't walk in a sort of well-paced path, right? There is no
Right.
path laid out because there's no strategy, right? There's no
Right.
strategy behind it. I think that that's brilliant. And you sort of touched on this, but could you elaborate a little bit on, you said podcast, you said blogging, but for those of us who just know, oh, we're supposed to have a podcast or et cetera, I often find with my clients that they don't even really consider offline marketing as an option. They think
Mm-hmm.
business has to be 100% online, things like that, right? They don't consider the in-person opportunities. So similarly, in your world, what are all the kinds of content, for example, that you help clients with, whether that's be blog posts and beyond? What, give us sort of a list or a way to think about it from a memory jogging perspective.
Sure. So I define content marketing as any time you're having a conversation with a potential client that could ultimately lead to a sale. So anytime, literally anytime you're engaged in some sort of conversation with a client. So that could be tweets, it could be TikTok, it could be, I don't care, Facebook Live, IGTV, podcasts, blog posts, emails. I've never done a billboard, but I've always thought it would be a fun challenge. But old school sales letters, if you mail out postcards, any of that is content that you're providing with the ultimate goal of making a sale. So it doesn't have to be spammy, skeezy, used car salesman content, but anytime we are communicating with our audience, that's content marketing. So in terms of what we help with, our sort of zone of genius is any kind of ongoing content. So that includes blog posts, email newsletters, podcast show notes. We've even helped people script regular Facebook lives. So like if they're going live in their group every week, we help them come up with an outline every week to make sure they stay on focus. So really anytime people are having that conversation, we can step in. And although we do one-off projects like sales sequences for emails and things like that, we really do focus a lot on that ongoing content because I think that's where people need a lot of help. The consistency and having to churn it out every week can be really daunting, especially if you're a very small business. So we like to help with that.
Perfect. And from your perspective, having worked with so many different types of small business owners, people at different levels, how important would you say it is that they have some sort of brand identity before you work with them?
Oh, super important. So here's a little secret. The only people I've ever worked with that were unhappy with our copy were the people who didn't know what they wanted in the first place. And that is directly a branding problem. That's a messaging problem. And while I can help you spin it and make it sound amazing, you got to know what your message is up front. So I actually love working with people like you or clients of your, like people like you, Annie, because when they come to me with a strong brand platform, message, foundation, it's 1,000 times easier for us to come up with the copy, no matter what it's for, whether it's for a sales page or a blog post. It's so much easier when they have a really good understanding of their brand and their brand voice and what that means. So branding, sometimes we think of as, like you said, logos and colors and photos, but there's also a voice aspect, right? So how do you communicate? What does it sound like? What do your blog posts sound? How do they stand out? And when you have a solid brand, we can do a much better job emulating that brand voice.
Yeah. And I think that's a great way to illustrate, some people may have tuned in and go, well, Annie, don't you do copywriting? Why are you having Lacy on? And I love having Lacy on because Lacy sort of picks up where Greatest Story leaves off. So the work I do with Greatest Story Creative is I'm helping a lot of service-based business owners like coaches and consultants find that brand voice, not only define their logo, but also their tagline at the same time, their about story, as well as their colors and their fonts, all based on that S word, that sexy strategy that we come together on. And so I'm helping people sort of get that message, that brand identity together. And then you can work with a partner like Lacy to do that ongoing content. I don't do ongoing, let me write a blog post for you or an email newsletter, but Lacy and her team are fantastic at it, right? So that's where we connect and we share this love of branding and this, it makes both our jobs easier. If we follow these things. So you would, again, that S for sexy strategy, just like you do, Lacy, like having goals in mind, having that well-founded brand. For me, with my clients, years ago, I did not used to have a strategy step. I sort of just did a questionnaire and then I started off on my way. And for the past several years, I've done a creative brief. I don't expect my clients to do it. I actually do it for you. We do it as a partnership. So you send me everything, I fill out the brief, and then we go over it together to make sure it's correct. And ever since then, to your point, you've never had an unhappy client that had a well-founded brand, right? To start with, it's the ones that didn't know what they wanted. Same here. I've never had an unhappy client when we've aligned on the strategy.
It's all about expectations, right? Like I can't meet someone's expectations if they don't know what they are, or they can't communicate what they are. Right.
I always like to say, I went through this. I had a corporate career at Disney and it was amazing, but it was not all sunshine and kitties and rainbows, right? It was corporate America. And there were moments where I had challenging managers. And I remember expectations weren't clear. So raise your hand if you ever had a job where your expectations weren't clear.
Oh, Lord.
And so what I would always say is like, if you don't know where the target is, you don't know. I don't know if I'm hitting it. I don't know if I'm a mile away from it. So exactly. Like my goal is to hit the target. My goal is to get that A+. And my husband would tell you that I'm big on A+. I want to get great. I always want the A+. But if I don't know what the grading scale is, I have no idea how to be successful. And same goes for small businesses. When you are assessing your own marketing, when you're trying to reach clients, if you haven't set up what the rules are and what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, what makes you happy, what makes you sustainable, you have no idea what target you're trying to hit. You're just gunshot. You're just the rocks in the river, to use Lacy's great metaphor. So that is all amazing. And I know we have that third tip coming up that Lacy, you want to share with everybody. But before that, I want to make sure people know how to connect with you. And I know there's something special that you wanted to share with our Branding with Friends audience. So what is that you wanted to offer from your world of content?
Yeah, so I thought it would be great to offer, since we're talking about strategy and knowing your goals and planning and all that good stuff, I have an editorial calendar template that I use with all of my one-on-one clients. And I've actually expanded it into a full business dashboard for content marketing. So what you get is the editorial calendar, which helps you plan out what am I going to say week by week. But it also has several additional tabs that help you track it. Because when you have a goal, you can assign that goal a number, a metric, and then you can track it and say, how am I progressing towards that goal? So the editorial calendar and the dashboard, we call it the leadership marketing dashboard. And I'm putting that together for you guys. It'll be at lacyboggs.com/brandingwithfriends, all one word. So it'll be easy to remember, and you can get that for free. And it comes with the Google Doc and a little video explainer that shows you how to use it.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with folks. If you're new to Branding with Friends, all our amazing guest experts offer something great for you to keep putting these tips into action. So take Lacy up on that opportunity. I think, Lacy, you make a great point about making sure not only that you're doing it, but that you're tracking. If you don't pay attention, you don't know if you're meeting your goals. Again, it all comes back to that. So I'm so glad that you're going to share that with us. And wherever you're watching or listening to this episode, you should be able to see that link as well. So I'm glad that you shared it, Lacy, but it'll also be linked wherever you should be watching or listening. So we're coming right around. Lacy, I'm so glad you were here today. I think we have one last tip. It was something special about traffic. So Tell us a little bit more about your last tip today, the last thing we want to leave our small business owners thinking about.
I saved this one for the end on purpose. So I think a lot of times online business owners get swayed by shiny objects and fancy tactics. And a lot of times people think they need a really elaborate funnel that starts with ads and goes through emails and does all these different things in order to make sales. And those all work in certain circumstances. I'm not throwing shade at marketing funnels because we build those too. But what I want to impress on people is focus on also building organic demand for whatever you're doing. And by that, I mean demand that comes to you without you having to pay for it. So the more, I know you said you did an SEO episode with Meg, who I love. SEO is a big part of this, right? So writing the content with humans in mind first, but search engines in mind as well. We want to be there when somebody is searching for a way to solve their problem. We want to be the search result that comes up, because then that is organic demand. They're already excited and want to solve that problem. So the more organic content you create, be that blog posts or whatever it may be, the more likely you are to be that person who shows up in Google's results. And this is a long game. So paid demand, paid traffic, and organic demand are two sides of a coin, and we use them at different times. They're two tools that we can use. When you need traffic fast, you have more money than time, that's when paid advertising happens. And when you need traffic consistently over a long period of time and you have more time than money, that's when organic demand is what we want to focus on. So I just don't want people to forget about it, because as you said before, it's not that sexy, right? Like to be like, okay, I'm going to blog every day or every week.
That's the challenge I think you and I have, Lacy, is to convince people to realize that strategy is with a capital S as in sexy.
Yes.
It's going to bring you everything you want.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't feel like it's the fun step, but it is the fun step if you think about all the joy it's going to bring you, all the beautiful clients, all the happy experiences, and the money coming into your bank account. Like,
and I've got the receipts on this. You know, I have a client that we worked together for 4 years, and she was able to she was generating an average of 5,000 leads a year, hot leads, just from organic traffic. And she was keeping an average of 750 paid members in her membership site with zero advertising. So that was enough to like pay her, make a great revenue, pay 2 employees, and pay me, and all with organic traffic. So I know this can be done, and I think it's just not as exciting as like, oh, turn on the ad and suddenly we have a bazillion people. But ads aren't magic, right? You still have to get that second click, and that's where content comes in.
Yeah. And I think there's also this assumption that everything is very passive, right? That if you pay for it, it's passive. And that's so not true. It's sort of the lie we've all been sold about passive income. But I love that you talk about the organic traffic and, you know, wanting the demand to be there, right? Someone's seeking you out. And I would say that that's probably true beyond just the world of search engines. It's something that's really on my mind that I'm working on a second book right now. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is that you want a business that's going to be in demand from ideal clients, not demanding of your ideal clients.
Yes.
You know, if I get one more sort of, I'm calling them lukewarm calls or lukewarm emails or lukewarm messages, people I've known that are suddenly like, hey, do you want to hire me? And do you have a problem? Or not even asking if I have a problem. So I know you have a problem. Like I just got a LinkedIn message asking if I had trouble with my eyes. And it's someone who specializes in aging. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like turning 35 in a couple of weeks.
Random?
Like, and by the time this episode's aired, I'll be 35. Like, do my eyes look like they have problems? But the whole point of that, not that obviously it's funny, but going back to this notion of being in demand versus demanding of your audience is you really want people who are looking for you. Right. So like, search for Lacy Boggs are going to be a better fit than people just looking for content writer. Right. Content marketing strategy. Right. And so you've raised your visibility through your work and through doing episodes like this, and same here. And so I do it through speaking. You've done it through writing and blogging. And there's ways that you can do it too, if you're listening or watching this episode. So I want you to be thinking about what are some ways that, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to like lukewarm email people and people came looking just for you? That if you listen to some of today's tips and start thinking about that sexy strategy, that's where you're going to be, because you don't want to be demanding and come and turn people off. You want people knocking down your door. And even going through, you know, we've going through the coronavirus crisis, you know, I'm having people come to me even during that and still being an in-demand business. And that's where you want to be. So you don't come across like you are bugging people, right? You want people coming to bug you so you can help them and add the value that you have. So Lacy, thank you so much for our amazing tips. If everybody wants to remember, of course, know your goals for your content marketing first and foremost. The second one, Lacy, you were so nice to share with us, which is this notion of making sure whatever you are writing about is going to lead to a sale, set up that nice rocks in the river path. And then last but not least is focus on that organic traffic. So placing a high premium on that, because that is what is going to help you have consistency in your business over time in terms of clients that you really want to work with. So Lacy, thank you so much again. I'm so glad that you were here on Branding with Friends.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad to have you. And I hope that you enjoyed another episode of Branding with Friends. So many thanks to my very special guest, Lacy Boggs of the Content Direction Agency. I hope you'll tune in in next time when we're going to tackle yet another topic where branding meets business. Until then, I'm Annie Franceschi of Greatest Story Creative. You can find all our episodes, lots of branding resources, a lot of those branding posts I talk about, and more at our website, greateststorycreative.com. Have a great one.